Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson about cities. Now, you might think, Bob, you live out in the country. What could you possibly know about cities? Well, I have not only been to some major cities, I actually lived in a big city when I was in university. So I do know a little bit about cities. I did a lesson I think a year ago on the city versus the country, and I looked over that lesson and thought, I haven't done a lesson specifically about cities. So in this English lesson, we'll learn some words and phrases that you can use when talking about the city. I'm sure some of you or most of you live in cities. Not everyone lives out in the country. I know some of you do, but I think most of you will appreciate some of the words and phrases that I'll be talking about in this lesson about cities. Downtown. So when you have a city, it can sometimes be referred to as a town, although a town is smaller than a city, but sometimes a nickname for a city is to just call it a town. And the oldest part of the city, usually the oldest part or the place where the city started many, many years ago, is called downtown. So when you go to downtown Toronto, it's like the oldest, busiest part of the city. Most cities will have what's called a downtown. Again, a downtown is the older part of the city where the city was founded, where the city was first came into existence. If you ever visit Canada and you're able to go to downtown Toronto, I think you will really enjoy it. Some places also call it the city center. It depends on what country you're in and what city you're in. We generally in Canada use the word downtown, but I know there are a few cities that talk about the city center. The city center, it's very similar to the word downtown. It is the central area of the city. It might have a town square. Even though it's a city, it might have a town square. It might have a big open area where there's a market on Saturdays or something like that, or festivals on the weekend. But downtown and city center are both very, very similar phrases, and it will just depend on what city you are visiting. The city will determine what it is called. Many cities have a main street. So interestingly enough, listen carefully. Main Street might be called Main Street. The actual name of the most important street in the city might be Main Street. When you see the sign, it will say Main Street. But you can also use this to describe a road that is the main street, but has a different name. In Toronto, the main street in Toronto is actually called Yonge Street. It's one of the longest streets in the world. But most cities will have a main street where it's usually connected to the downtown. Not always, but it's usually part of the downtown. And Main Street is usually its name, but sometimes it has a different name. And I was going to use another phrase there, the downtown core. Sometimes we add the word core when we're talking about the downtown area of a city. So in the downtown core, you will usually find Main Street in most cities. You might also live on the outskirts. The outskirts of town are where the city meets the country. So if you live on the very edge of the city, you are on the outskirts of the city. Or if it's a town, you're on the outskirts of the town. The outskirts in this picture, you can see clearly that there is a farmer's field right beside houses. So the outskirts are located right where the city ends. Sometimes you'll talk to someone and say, I'd like to visit you. Where do you live? And they'll say, oh, I live on the outskirts of the city. Take this road and you will eventually see my house. If you see fields, you've gone too far. Usually housing on the outskirts of the city is relatively new. So a lot of times newer houses will be found on the outskirts of the city because as the city grows, they expand into the surrounding countryside. And we also have something called the suburbs. The suburbs are a residential area. I'll talk about the word residential in a bit. It's a place where people live. Cities have many different areas, many different zones or districts, but what we call the suburbs is the place where a lot of people live. You'll find a lot of houses, you'll find some apartment buildings. The suburbs are very common in North America. and it may have other words in other English-speaking countries. But in Canada and in the United States, the place where most people live in a city is usually outside of the downtown area, and we call it the suburbs. And the suburbs can be close to the outskirts of the city. You might find a particular kind of neighborhood there, which is called a subdivision. A subdivision is a place where they build roads and houses. Sometimes the houses, especially in Canadian subdivisions, look very, very similar because they try to build a lot of houses with a similar style to keep the costs down. When every house or every other house has the same design, it's a little cheaper to build those houses. So you might find subdivisions. I'm sure a few of you live in a subdivision. I know many of you live in the city in an apartment building, but I imagine some of you live in a subdivision. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the different areas of the city. So you have a residential area, which I mentioned earlier. This will depend on how your city was designed. Some cities mix all of the areas together, but in newer cities in North America, they were very deliberate about having residential areas where people live. So a residential area contains houses, apartment buildings, etc., and it's a place where people live. A commercial area is a place where you'll find lots of stores. So when I go to my local, the closest city to me, it has residential areas that have lots of houses or two-story houses or small apartment buildings. And then every few blocks, there will be a commercial area where there's a grocery store and a Walmart and a few fast food restaurants. So they've designed the city to have specific areas. So once again, residential is where people live. Commercial is where you find lots of stores. On the edge of the city, you might have an industrial area or an industrial park. This is where you'll find factories and places where they do manufacturing. You might also find office buildings, depending on the type of city that it is. But a lot of cities have been divided up into distinct areas. If you've ever played the game SimCity on the computer, SimCity is a game where you design a city and you designate where people can live, where stores will be, and where there will be factories. And then the computer builds the city for you. If your city is big enough, it might have a financial district. So if your city is a very large city like Toronto or Montreal or New York City, there might be a specific area of the city where there are a lot of banks, where there's a lot of money investing people, stockbrokers, and those types of things, mortgage companies. And we would call that the financial district. I think this is the Bank of England, by the way. It's not a financial area. For some reason, we now use the word district. So it's residential area, commercial area, industrial park or industrial area, and then financial district. So a place where you will find a lot of banks. And then we have a new-ish word, relatively new, and that word is green space. Green space is any place in the city where there's grass and trees. So it includes parks, but it can also include small walkways and pathways. It can include having like small parks or trees along the side of the road, and it's a little wider than normal. It can include like a skate park with a lot of trees and grass around it. A skate park is where kids go to skateboard. In Canada, we are trying to include more and more green space when we design our cities, because green space is just really healthy for people. So hopefully your city has a lot of green space and you enjoy it a lot. Living in a city with very little green space means you have to travel really far to get to a park or an outdoor area. The theater district. If your city is big enough, you might have an area called the theater district. This is a place where you would go to see a play, not a movie. You would go to see a play. Cities like Toronto have a theater district. This is the Royal Alexandra Theatre. I think I've actually been there. I think I saw Mamma Mia there when I was younger. I think so. And if you go to a city like London, it might have a theater district. a really cool place to go if you want to see a play. Theaters have been closed, of course, for a very long time, but they are just starting to open again. I think in New York, the theater district is starting to open. I think you can go see a show on Broadway now if you're vaccinated, I think. And in Toronto, I think things are starting to open up a little bit too. You also have what's called the city limits. So a city actually has a border. I'm not sure if you knew that, but there's a spot where the city ends and the countryside begins, or another city begins if there's two cities beside each other. And we would call that the city limits. When you're driving to Toronto, or when you're driving to a city like Hamilton, you will see a sign that says "Welcome to Toronto" or "Welcome to Hamilton." And that would be the city limits. It's the edge of the city. It's the border. There's no border guards. There's no line on the road. There's just a sign when you're driving along that says, "Welcome to the city," or it says you are now leaving the Toronto city limits, or you're leaving Toronto. You would see that at the city limits. There is something called a city block. I'm not sure this is the best picture, but you can see that. I don't think I can move my mouse on this picture, sorry. But there is a square design to this city where you have a road, another road, and another road, and everything in the middle would be called a city block. We often use the word block when we're giving directions in a city. If someone says, is the museum that way? The response might be, yes, it's about 4 blocks. So go 4 blocks this way and then go 2 blocks to the right and you will arrive at the museum. So again, a city block is the square area between 4 roads in a city. It can also have different shapes depending on how your city was designed. I think the interesting thing about North America is that many of our cities are so young that they have very geometric designs to them. In Europe and in other parts of the world, the cities are quite old and the streets might not be straight. Many cities in Canada have straight roads because they built the city using that style. And so you have city blocks. A city block can also be a triangle, like you could call that a block, but usually it's a square. And then neighborhood. So a neighborhood is just a word to describe an area that has a lot in common with the other houses there. So you might live in a really nice neighborhood. That would be like your house and a few of the houses around you. It might be a few city blocks. It might be 1 city block. But you might, when you move to a city, ask someone who knows the city, what's a nice neighborhood to move into? And they'll say, oh, there's a really nice neighborhood down by the lake. You should move there. So a neighborhood, it's not the same as a block. A block is very defined. A neighborhood can be a rather large area or a small area. And it can have really cute houses that have similar styles. It might have people, a neighborhood might have a lot of people who all came from one country. Sometimes that happens as well. But definitely, if you move to the city, ask around and find out what's a good neighborhood to move into. Uptown. So here, this is going to be a little fun to define. Some cities, most cities have a downtown. Some cities have an uptown. But uptown means something different maybe in each city, okay? So uptown, you need to ask why it's called uptown because it will be different. Uptown might mean the northern part of the city. Uptown might mean the part of the city that's higher than the rest of the city. Uptown might mean where the rich people live. So you really need to ask people in the city why it's called uptown. In Toronto, uptown is just the northwest part of the city. We call that uptown Toronto, but you need to find out. So again, uptown can be the northern part of the city. Uptown might mean the part of the city that's higher than the rest of the city. It's kind of on a hill. Uptown might be the part of the city where all the rich people live. And then we have something called Midtown. Midtown is usually similar to downtown, but in Toronto, Midtown refers to kind of the business area of the town. So if you go to Midtown Toronto, you'll see a lot of office buildings. Okay. Again, Midtown is similar to Uptown. You need to ask. You should ask around and say, I need to go to Midtown. Why is it called Midtown? And they'll tell you why it's called Midtown and where it is. You might also have the East End, the West End, the North End, the South End. So as a city gets larger, people might say, oh, you're looking for that. Oh, it's in the North End of the city, or it's in the West End of the city. They might even say the side, like the East Side, the West Side, the South Side. Again, these are unique to each city. In London, England, I think they use East End, West End, and those types of terms. I think in New York, they might use East Side, West Side. They might even say Upper West Side. So you need to kind of learn your compass directions and the word end as well. Things you might find in the city. So I'm going to just go over a few things you'll find in the city that you probably won't see in the country. One of those is a one-way street. A one-way street is, of course, a street that you can only go down in one direction. I like one-way streets once I know where they are. I don't like one-way streets if I'm unfamiliar with a city, because it can get confusing. You want to turn, and then you're not allowed to turn because it's a one-way street. You'll see mass transit. So mass transit is the general term for things like the subway, the metro, let's see here, streetcars, trams. I think even taxis and Uber might fall under that, but I think mostly you're talking about city buses, the subway, the metro. Maybe it's called, I'm trying to think of, it might just call it the train, definitely streetcars and those kinds of things. And then I think in Quebec, they had a funiculaire, which was like a little train elevator that went up. I said it included taxis and Ubers, but I don't think it does. I think mass transit refers to definitely things like buses and the subway. You'll definitely see skyscrapers in the city. A skyscraper is a very, very tall building. One of the things I like about going to the city is I like looking at the skyscrapers. It's really cool to see buildings that are that tall. You don't see those in the country. They're called skyscrapers because it looks like they touch the sky, like they're scraping against the sky. Very, very cool. The city has a nice skyline. So the skyline is the shape of the city from far away that lets you identify it. If you see the skyline of Toronto, you can recognize it because you see the CN Tower. You might also see the Rogers Center. I think that's what it's called now, the Sky Dome, which is the white thing in the middle. So when you look at a city from the outskirts of the city, especially at night, sometimes during the day, you can see the shape of the city. And we would call that the skyline. Your city might have a bike share program. A bike share program, these are becoming quite popular. In fact, there are even things, so you can rent a bike. You have an app on your phone and you can punch in a code and then you can rent a bike. I think in some cities it might even be free. Don't quote me on that. And some cities do this with scooters as well. A scooter, a little electric scooter might be kind of cool to use if you are exploring a city. But definitely you will find bike share programs in some cities. You will find City Hall. Almost every city in their downtown area will have City Hall. It might also be called Town Hall. Even if it's a city, it might be referred to as Town Hall. But City Hall or Town Hall is the place where the mayor works, where the city councilors work, where the people who have been elected to run the city go every day for work. So if you are in a large city, you probably have a City Hall. I think you can even get married at City Hall. I think a lot of people get married in churches still, but you, I think, can go to City Hall if you want to get married as well. And the Justice of the Peace will marry you. And then, of course, city lights. One of the coolest things about cities, I think this is a city in China, by the way, I'm not 100% sure, is the city lights. At night, a city is beautiful. I'll talk about light pollution a little bit later, but at night, a city has a beautiful glow to it and it is lit up, and the city lights can just be really, really cool to look at. I, in particular, really like city lights. I don't live in the city, so I could appreciate them when I visit the city. Conveniences. We've talked a little bit about this during the lesson, but one of the things that you have in the city is you have a lot of conveniences. I did a lesson a few months ago or a few weeks ago on conveniences. Conveniences are things that make life nicer or easier. There are certainly a lot of conveniences in the city. You have taxis, you can get an Uber, you can get pizza delivered. You can go for a walk to almost anything. If you want to go to a restaurant or a bar or a theater or to go see a movie or to do some shopping, you can walk most likely. It's just kind of cool, I think, the conveniences that you have in the city. And you also have really, really fast internet in the city compared to the country. My internet is fast, but it's also expensive. So thank you, members, for helping out with that. Some cities have what's called a bypass. A bypass is a large highway that goes down the middle of the city. It might go around the city, and it's a place where you can travel very quickly from one end of the city to the other. It might be called a bypass. It might be called a beltway. It might be called a belt line. It has a number of different names, and it might be unique to that city. And some cities have more than one. But what it is, and you can see in the picture, is it's a highway that goes right through the city, or maybe it goes around each side of the city. And it makes it a little easier to get to different parts of the city. So what English speakers would say is, I'm going to go to the south end of the city. I'm going to jump on the highway, or I'm going to jump on the bypass, or I'm going to jump on the beltway or belt line. And it's just a way to quickly drive at highway speeds to get to another part of the city. Cities that have this type of road are really easy to get around. In Toronto, though, if you jump on any of the highways that go through Toronto, you usually end up in a traffic jam. A city might have a landmark. A landmark is any recognizable feature of the city. It might be natural, or it might be something that was built there. But a landmark is something that usually you can see from far away. So it could be a tower. And it's just something that is unique to that city. You can also use it when you're walking around the city so you know where you are. And like I said, when I was saying how to give directions, you could say, look at this, walk toward the CN Tower. And then when you get to the bottom of it, head north or something. So you can use it to give directions as well. A lot of cities, big cities, will have what's called a convention center. A convention center is just a large building that can be used for different kinds of shows. What I mean by show, though, isn't like a TV show. A show like in Toronto, they'll have a car show, and you can go there and see all the new cars. So Nissan and Lamborghini and every car maker you can think of comes and shows their new cars. So you can go to the convention center for a car show. They might have a boat show. They might have a home and garden show. Before COVID, there were a lot of shows that you could go to, and almost all of them are at what's called a convention center. There might be a station in your city. Let me make this a little bigger. In Toronto, the main train, bus, transit station is called Union Station. It might have a different name in your city, but there is usually one main station. It might be Grand Central Station. It might be Union Station. It might have a different name entirely, but usually there will be at least one main station in your town where you would go if you wanted to travel somewhere. You might find a lot of parking garages. Out in the country, we don't need parking garages, but in the city, there are buildings where you can drive your car and go all the way to the top, or it might even go underground and you will park your car there. In Toronto, there are a lot of parking garages. It's quite expensive to park your car in a parking garage, but it's sometimes, I was going to say it sometimes shocks me how expensive it is to park in the city. It's quite a bit more expensive. Where I live, you don't pay to park anywhere, but in the city, you often have to pay for parking. Your city, and a lot of cities are trying to do this, might have a bike path on the same road where cars go. It might have a bike lane on the same road where cars drive, or it might have special bike paths where only bikes are allowed to go. So I kind of messed that up, so let me re-explain. A bike path is a path. It might be paved or it might be gravel just for bikes. A bike lane is a part of an existing road where bikes are allowed to drive on. A lot of cities are trying to increase the number of bike paths and bike lanes that they have, because a city that is bikeable is a very friendly city. If you can bike to different parts of the city, it's very, very handy and enjoyable. And in fact, the Netherlands is probably the place in the world with the most bikes, and they have really cool designs for their cities so that you can bike everywhere. Okay, I'm going to end with 3 negatives. Are you ready? 3 things that I don't like about the city. Number 1, the smell. When I go to the city, you might think that Canada's this beautiful country and everything is wonderful, but when you go to the city has a certain smell to it. It smells a little bit like garbage. It has certain odors and smells. Not everywhere, but sometimes you're walking down the street and you'll just smell like maybe there's a dumpster full of garbage and maybe the garbage is rotting a little bit. So the first negative thing about cities, sometimes they smell. Number 2, sometimes there is a lot of pollution. Cities sometimes have smog. Where I live, the air is always clear. There's never any smog here. Sometimes it gets a little humid. Earlier this summer, there were forest fires, so there was some pollution, but generally there's no pollution in the country. In the city, depending on your city, there might be a lot of smog. There might be a lot of pollution in the air. And then light pollution. I mentioned how much I love the city lights. I love the look of the city at night, especially when it rains, because it makes everything have like a really cool look to it. But some people don't like the light pollution. If you were someone who liked astronomy and you had a telescope and you liked looking at the stars, if you live too close to the city has so much light coming out of it, it makes it hard to do that. So 3 things I don't like about the city: smell, pollution, and light pollution. That's it. Other than that, I like most things about the city.